Hi, everybody, and welcome to session F2, Tier 2 Evidence-Based Practices. So this is the second session in the Tier 2 strand. I'm one of your presenters today. I'm Dr. Kelsey Morris, and I'm the co-director of the MU Center for School-Wide Positive Behavior Support at the University of Missouri. We're excited to talk with you today about evidence-based practices at Tier 2 and continue that line of thinking and conversation that you had if you joined the first session, kind of looking at the big picture overview of systems, practices, and data with Tier 2. So our presenters today, I'm going to turn my video on, just kind of introduce myself. As I mentioned, I'm Dr. Kelsey Morris. I'm the co-director of the MU Center for School-Wide PBS, the University of Missouri. I'm excited to be here with all of you today talking about evidence-based practices. And I'm going to give my other co-presenter and our exemplars a chance to introduce themselves individually.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Dr. Tricia Guffey. I am a Senior Research Associate at the University of Missouri with the MU Center for School-Wide PBS. A little bit of background, I'm a former teacher and administrator and have been with the university for a little over 5 years.
Great. My name is Mimi Cato, and I am a Senior Research Assistant at the University of Oregon. I'll be in the kind of mode of an exemplar today. So my goal is to bring you lots of examples and experience from all of our work in working with high schools and specific to implementing Tier 2.
Hi, I'm Nadia Sampson. I work with Mimi at the University of Oregon, and I too will be talking about some of the work we've done with some high schools nearby us. So welcome this morning. It's good to be here.
So we've got a great session designed for you today. We're going to take a look at evidence-based practices at Tier 2. So if you are going to implement at Tier 2, what might you implement? And each one of us today has our own independent background, doing this at the district level or doing this at the individual building level and working across grade levels all the way from kindergarten up to high school. So we've really got some great content for you today that hopefully will allow you to dip your toe in the water of Tier 2 interventions. So as a friendly reminder, this is a PBIS event. What event would be complete without some expectations? So just a quick overview or reminder of the virtual forum expectations, being responsible, being respectful, and being safe across the event at large, as well as the chat tab poll opportunities that are available for you within the Pathables platform. So within Pathable, you're able to use that big, broad blue bar across the top to navigate around. And one of the things that you've got access to is your own agenda. So if you go to agenda and then my agenda, you'll find all the things that you registered for this conference. And anytime you see a green check in the upper right corner, that's something that you signed up for. So navigating around Pathables, you've got the opportunity to go to your agenda, join that session that you signed up for. And within that, you can see lots of information about that session in particular, namely, what's it called, who's presenting, what time is it offered, a nice description or keywords. But then you'll see the option to join that session. And within that, right below that join button, you're going to see chat and polls and files. And we're going to talk about those so that way you can stay engaged and contribute to what's happening with this conversation. So with chat, you've got the opportunity to send notes through and connect with other people in the session, but namely our content facilitators. So we've got two wonderful content facilitators that are on the session today that are able to respond as things come through. Additionally, if you click on the polls option, you're going to see a Q&A. So each session, we really try to carve out time at the end to address those targeted questions and provide really salient responses and answers. So you can expect from us that we'll hold time at the end for a Q&A. So feel free at any point during the session today, as a question pops up, send it right through in that polls feature for the Q&A, and our content facilitators will kind of curate them so we can have a facilitated session at the end. As well, we've got two polls that are there for you today. We've got poll question 1, we've got poll question 2. And what we ask, and just as a friendly pre-correct, is hold off on responding to the polls until we have a chance to talk to you about what that question's asking. So we've got time in the slides where we'll have a visual prompt or a visual cue that we're getting ready to do the poll. And then whoever's presenting will kind of give you some insight into what that poll's asking, so that way you can respond in the best way possible. It is possible in Pathable to accidentally navigate away. So if you're in the session watching what's happening and you click on anything else, maybe something up at that blue bar, or you decide to know a little bit more about the presenter, it's going to move you away from the session and move you into another part of Pathable. So you've navigated away, just click on agenda and then go to my agenda, find this session again, F2, and you can navigate your way back. At any time, know that support is available. So you can click the option at that blue bar up at the top, click on the help desk and access some additional tech support. So that way you get the most out of this conference experience. What we want to do with you today is provide an overview of evidence-based practices at Tier 2. So by the end of this session, what do we hope you walk away with? We hope that you walk away with the ability and the knowledge to identify the necessary components of targeted interventions. If we're going to do something at Tier 2 to provide targeted supports for students, what has to be at play? What are the essential elements, or we'll talk about them as the necessary components? What do we have to have in place in order to do this right? As well, we want you to be able to leave today being able to summarize the recommended evidence-based Tier 2 interventions. We're going to present to you today several options that you could use at Tier 2 to support students with targeted needs, knowing that each one of those options has a significant evidence base behind it. Now, the pre-correct to that is any presenter on today's session, we could do a whole day on just one of the evidence-based interventions we're going to talk about today. Our goal today is to kind of give you the broad strokes, the big picture overview, and then point you to additional resources. So that way, if we pique your interest and you identify a Tier 2 intervention that could work for you and work for your school climate and your student population, you know a little bit about it just to start being dangerous with it. And dangerous in a good way, I should say. So as we move into our content, thinking about those critical features, here's what we've got to have at place at Tier 2. And this is going to build on the conversation that was started in the first session of this strand. So when we think about Tier 2, it really needs to be anchored back to what's happening at Tier 1. So for students that aren't completely successful at Tier 1, they need something additional, something more targeted. What we don't do is create a whole brand new system, a whole new set of expectations and a whole new language and way of working. We want to extend or glow up or grow up that green zone. So what we're doing at Tier 2 is going to be built on what we're doing at Tier 1. And to that end, it should be continuously available. We want to have grab and go interventions, things that are standardized across the building. So that way, as students demonstrate a level of need, and as the data says, hey, what are we doing for this student in particular, or this group of students? We've got a menu of options that we can draw from. And we'll talk today about really how to think about creating that menu of options. Because the goal is that when students are identified, we want to grab and go. We want things that are continuously available, which gets rapid access to that intervention. Lots of times we might say, we want to be able to identify a student as being necessary for the intervention or demonstrating a level of need. And within 3 days, we've got that ball rolling. So we want to get rapid access. Now, by the time the student's in the intervention, that intervention should be designed to provide additional instruction. What we did at Tier 1, those fundamentals, those essentials, all kids, all settings, all the time, for these students, just wasn't enough. So they need additional instruction on the expectations or additional instruction for skill development. They just need a little bit more. Along the way, we're going to keep our fingers on the pulse of what's going on because we want to continuously progress monitor both the outcomes for the students, because if the intervention's not working, and we know we've done it with fidelity, so there's that fidelity check, well, then we need to change course. But if the intervention is working and we're doing it the way it was designed and the way we said we would, then we want to keep going and move that student closer to success. Along the way for the adults, Tier 2 interventions need to be low effort. So it's not a brand new curriculum. It's not a brand new package or program. We're taking what we've been doing school-wide at Green Zone and saying, I'm just going to intensify it. I'm going to give it a greater dosage or a greater level of frequency. I'm giving targeted instruction. Lots of times we do this with academics. We're going to think about it similarly and essentially the same way here with behavior. So I mentioned that Tier 2 builds on Tier 1. At Tier 1, we've got foundational elements in place. Our students know the expectations we've established. Maybe it's safe, respectful, responsible, or whatever the expectations are for your building. We've got routines and rules across the different settings, as well as in our own classroom. Because at Tier 1, we're all about prevention and proactive situations. We want to kind of prevent problem behavior from happening by thinking and being proactive. So with that prevention mindset, we're actively supervising, we're moving, scanning, interacting with students in a positive nature. In our classrooms with instruction, we're really trying to give students frequent opportunities to respond to keep them engaged, because when you're on task, well, then you're on task. We don't have issues of problem behavior that arise. Along the way, we're also acknowledging or reinforcing or encouraging every time a student demonstrates the expected behavior. And we're going to use our good brain. We know our students well. We know when mistakes are most likely to occur. So we're going to prompt and pre-correct and hopefully prevent the instance of problem behavior. And at the same time, we're all human, even our students. We know that errors will happen. They make academic errors. They're also going to make behavior errors. So we have to have some error correction strategies in place. Now, if we're doing all of those things well, we've got a solid foundation for Tier 2 and our advanced tiers to be built on top of. So when we get to Tier 2, it's a portion of our whole population. It's some students that their behaviors demonstrated, hey, I'm at risk here of some negative outcomes. And so we, as the adults in the building, want to create a system that's highly efficient. So that gets back to that grab and go mentality that we'll talk about today with the interventions that we highlight and how that facilitates a rapid response. It's important as we move forward and look at each one of the interventions that we draw that clear connection that Tier 2 is built on Tier 1. Because if we don't, we're building on a house of cards. If we don't have a solid Tier 1 foundation in place with all those things on the right-hand side of the screen, if we're not doing Tier 1 really well, we're not going to be able to do Tier 2 well. Because there's no secret sauce when we get to Tier 2. There isn't a whole brand new program or package. We're taking the things we did at Tier 1 and we're doing them at a greater level of intensity and a greater level of frequency. We're just more targeted. So we got to have that solid Tier 1 foundation in place. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenter, Dr. Tricia Guffey, who's going to talk to us about what could we do within our own classrooms to kind of shore up Tier 1 before we get to the need of doing Tier 2.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. So like you had mentioned, going through and we can implement a school-wide piece, but we've got to really ensure that we are embedding in those classroom practices. And so one way to really kind of look at that is the class-wide function-related intervention teams, which is also known as CW Fit. It is a research-based classroom intervention, and when implemented with fidelity, again, there's that key word again, fidelity, CW Fit can be utilized to help teachers increase their level of positive specific feedback, assist with classroom management, and increases instructional time due to a decrease in that problematic student behavior that we see at times. Now, CW Fit can be utilized by any teacher as a Tier 1 practice. However, some schools and districts that we've worked with have begun to utilize CW Fit as an entry-level tier 2, if you will. Center School District, for instance, in Kansas City, Missouri, utilizes the Sabres as their universal screener. As part of the tier 2 data decision rules, if a classroom has 40% or more of students identified as being at risk, that classroom teacher is required to implement CW Fit prior to other interventions being administered at that tier 2 level. By doing this, the district saw a decrease in the number of students who needed interventions such as check-in, check-out, self-monitoring, small group social skills, as the students' needs were met through that CW Fit intervention. Now, CW Fit can be implemented, like I said, in any classroom, and it increases the amount of positive specific feedback provided by the teacher to students. Now, I'm just going to provide you, like Kelsey said, we could go on for an entire day about each of these pieces, but I'm going to provide you just a really quick overview of essentially how this works. So first, the teacher sets a point goal for teams based on the amount of time in class, right? And those teams would be, 4 or 5 students. A skill is then taught, such as, let's say, how to follow directions the first time or how to ignore inappropriate behavior. From there, students are then placed into student teams based on where they're currently sitting. So you'd want it to be a natural setting. So for instance, row 1, 2, 3, or, all right, this is my blue pod, this is the red pod, the green pod. Once students know what team they're a part of, the timer's then set. Now, as you can see there, the timer's set. Now, most teachers start that timer off anywhere between 2 to 5 minutes when first starting CW Fit. Now, depending upon how many students and teams respond will ultimately determine how many minutes the timer is set for in the future. So for instance, if students are doing really well and all the students are meeting the goals, then essentially at that point in time, you might increase that timer because that repetition of positive specific feedback isn't needed as often. Or if you have teams that are not meeting that goal, you would decrease that amount of time so that they're receiving that positive specific feedback on a much more frequent scale. Now, when that timer is running, the teacher provides instruction on the academic lesson. Every time the timer goes off, the teacher will scan the room, kind of going back to what Kelsey talked about earlier as far as those effective classroom practices. That teacher scans the room and looks for students and the teams they are associated with to be displaying the skill that was taught. Now, that cycle will continue until the end of the hour. For each time, or for each team that has 100% of the members displaying the skill, a point is received and marked down. The teacher then provides positive specific feedback while reciting the skill and identifies the groups that receive the point. The timer is then reset and the teacher goes on with their regular classroom instruction. So this can be utilized in a math setting, in a science setting, in an English language arts setting, in your theater classroom, in your foods classroom or your business classroom. Again, like I said earlier, the cycle continues until the end of the hour. And at that point in time, the teacher will then tally up the team's points. And for those teams that meet the goal, a reinforcement is then provided. Again, this is just an example of one way that we can ensure that we are implementing that classroom level to ensure that those students are receiving that tier 1 support so that we can truly identify students that might need that additional tier 2 support.
So that's a way for us in our classrooms to kind of take all those things that I mentioned earlier, those critical features that should be available for us at tier 1, those prevention components, and make sure that we've got them in our classroom, that our classroom systems are shored up, so to speak, before we move into tier 2. Now, we are going to say that, okay, we've got tier 1 happening with Fidelity. Our classrooms are rocking and rolling. We've still got students that need additional support, so some targeted interventions. So if we say that, yeah, we have all those critical features that we talked about earlier, we're going to add to the conversation that our essential intervention elements are. At tier 2, we need additional instruction and time for student skill development. They didn't get it the first time, okay? So just like in an academic setting, if I didn't learn whatever it is in today's lesson the first time, We're going to reteach. We're going to give opportunities for additional instruction so that way I get a little bit more time to develop that skill. We also know at tier 2 that our interventions need to provide additional structure and predictability. So there needs to be a regular rhythm to the day. And within the interventions we highlight today, you'll see that each one of them provides structure. It provides predictability. There's consistency with the rhythm. At tier 2, we're also giving increased opportunity for feedback. Because if we're going to reteach and give you a chance to kind of pick up what you didn't get the first time, I got to give you feedback along the way. I got to make sure that you understand, yes, this is exactly it. You're doing it. And I'm going to give you specific feedback so you can replicate it the next time. As well, if you're continuing to make errors, I need to teach to that error. I need to describe specifically what's happening versus what you should be doing instead. So we get that opportunity for more feedback that's educative. And when we get to tier 2, we're thinking about function. What are you trying to get or avoid? Because if I'm going to put in place a targeted intervention, it needs to meet your behavioral function and meet that need. And so with each of the interventions we talk about today, there is that function and behavior element that's at play. So this brings us to a point in time for our first poll question. So if you go to Pathables, you've got the polls there for you. So you'll respond in Pathables. But I want you to think for a moment, and this is a kind of a mashup of 2 questions from the tiered fidelity inventory. Think about your building or the team you work with. Does your tier 2 team have multiple ongoing behavior support interventions that provide A, B, and C here? So additional instruction or time for students to develop the skill, additional structure or predictability to the student's day, increased opportunity for feedback. Do they have those 3 things? And are your interventions matched to the student's need, the behavioral function? So use the 0, 1, or 2 response options in Pathable, and we'll give you a minute to do that. And then I'm going to ask Danielle Starkey, who's one of our content facilitators today, to kind of give a voice over to how things turned out.
All right, Kelsey, results are still coming in, but it's pretty definitive that the majority are going for number 1, tier 2 interventions, or the intervention meets some but not all of the criteria. We have about 60% of respondents giving that one, and then it's split 20% for 0 and 2. And that's holding steady as more responses come in.
Thank you so much for letting us know that. I appreciate that. And I would say that that's pretty typical for all of us that have worked with buildings. That's pretty typical that we've got maybe tier 2 interventions meeting some, but not all of the criteria. So maybe it's A or B or C, but it's not all 3. Wherever you are on that 0, 1, 2, we want to point you back to a resource. So if you take the tiered fidelity inventory, the TFI, there's a great tool in there at Appendix B. It gives you the leverage with your building to build a menu of options. So when you think through, and here on the appendix, they give you an example, check in, check out, what's it going to do? Social skills club, what's it going to do? So you kind of see in that first column, do we have something in place in our building to give access to adult attention? Do we have something in place in our building to give access to peer attention, or something in place for our students to have a school home connection system? So these are things that we would want to have in our menu. And then this is an example of a completed table. So a building would say, yep, we've got check in, check out, and it does all these things. We're also doing social skills, and it does all of these things. And so there's a template there in the TFI for you, a blank one, to where you could do the same thing for your building, working to build a menu that meets all of these needs. What we're going to do with you today is highlight 3 specific tier 2 interventions. We're going to talk about check in, check out, or you might know it as CICO. My colleague Trisha Guffey is going to talk about social skills intervention groups. We're going to close that big, broad overview of tier 2 interventions by talking about self-monitoring. And then we'll move into our exemplars today, where they're going to talk and showcase check in, check out in the context of high schools, because that context is different. And valuable. So let's start with a conversation about check-in, check-out, or CICO. So this is kind of what we term to be the gold standard intervention. This is the one that if we're going to start doing something at tier 2, this is usually the something that we start with, because the components of this build the infrastructure that we could put a lot of other tier 2 interventions into. So it kind of gives us the foundation, so to speak, that we can layer additional things on top of. So within check-in, check-out, we've got to use data for decision making. So maybe it's office discipline referrals. Maybe it is a teacher request for assistance process that's in place in the building. But we've got some data that's at play here to nominate the student for check-in, check-out, and make sure that they are a good candidate. And so when I say a good candidate, this is an intervention that's really going to benefit students that gravitate or seek adult attention. So if you think about function of behavior, we're working to meet student needs. For students that seek adult attention, this is going to be a beneficial intervention for them. So once we implement the intervention, there's a morning check-in. That student goes to a key adult in the building. Sometimes it's called a check-in, check-out facilitator, somebody who facilitates the check-in in the morning, gives the students their daily progress report or their point card for the day, reminds them of their expectations, make sure they're ready to go to class. When they get into the classroom, throughout the day, there's a cycle of regular classroom feedback. So maybe that student is at a grade level where I stay with my homeroom teacher for all hours of the day. And so at each different natural transition, maybe reading to math, or the way our day is structured, it's just feedback and check-ins every hour. That teacher is going to go up to that student and initiate feedback. They're going to use the daily progress report. And we'll look at an example in just a minute of what that might be. So that way they can structure the feedback they give to that student, so that there's regular classroom feedback that's occurring, because additional instruction, additional feedback is necessary at tier 2. And by having it scheduled throughout the day, and that daily progress report we'll look at shows how it can be scheduled, then we're increasing the consistency and the predictability of the student's day. So here's what that looks like. Here's just a really simple example of a daily progress report. You can see in that first column, what are the expectations of the building? Maybe it's safe, respectful, responsible. And then as we move from left to right, those would be the feedback times. Maybe I get feedback from my teacher at the end of reading, or the end of math, or maybe at the end of chemistry. Okay. Or maybe it's just first period, second period, third period, whatever the structure of the day is, that teacher's going to give feedback. Total up those points and note them here on the DPR and give initials, kind of sign it away. And then there's a place to give wow comments, because we want to reinforce, acknowledge, and encourage when the student is meeting the expectation, because we hope to promote the replication of success. So throughout the day, the student's teacher or teachers are going to fill out this daily progress report, giving feedback to the student about how they're doing with meeting the expectations. And so a way that we oftentimes get people comfortable with that, because if you think, oh my gosh, I've got to give feedback in this instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times throughout the day, what am I going to say? How am I going to do this? Well, oftentimes in your building, you've got a behavior matrix. You've got a matrix that's in your hallways, in your settings, and hopefully you've got a matrix of expectations in your classroom. So if you think about, I'm safe, respectful, responsible, what does that look like, sound like in reading? Or what does that look like, sound like in chemistry lab or second period? If you've thought about what it is I'm actually expecting of the student, then that becomes a way for you to give really good substantive feedback of how the student is doing in meeting those expectations during that specific routine. So oftentimes when we train on check-in, check-out, this is a great activity to get people to rehearse, what might I say? And then by rehearsing it, they actually create their own little script that they can use with students. At the end of the day, the student's going to go back to that check-in, check-out facilitator. They're going to look at the completed daily progress report for the day and check out. So hopefully they've met their goal for the day and there's some form of celebration, acknowledgement, and reinforcement that happens in the afternoon with that check-in, check-out facilitator. If they haven't met their goal for the day, they're going to talk about what they could do differently tomorrow. Just maybe one little takeaway note that could change the trajectory the following day. The student then goes home with some form of communication from the school. Oftentimes, it could be the daily progress report itself. Could also be just a quarter sheet of paper with what was my goal for the day and what percent of that did I reach. And so and maybe one thing that I did well today that we could engage in conversation at home. So working to kind of close that loop, so to speak. While that's happening, there's a team of individuals in the building that's paying attention to what's going on and working to keep their fingers on the pace and on the pulse. So there's a check-in, check-out team. So it could also be your tier 2 or tier 3 interventions team or building team that's going to be engaging in regular meetings, looking at the data, working to understand, okay, how's the intervention going? Is this a student that we're going to continue the intervention? Things are going as planned. Great, let's keep moving. Or, you know what, we're okay. There's a few hiccups. How do we modify what's happening to get better outcomes for the student? Is there something that we need to kind of reteach or suggest for the teacher to kind of increase fidelity, because then that could increase outcomes? Or is this intervention a mismatch for the student and it's time to exit? Or have we done this intervention for a long enough duration that we've seen consistent and sustained success for the student? And hopefully we're exiting because we're going to graduate and we're going to celebrate and we're moving that student onto something else. Not necessarily another intervention, but we've kind of graduated from needing this intervention. So here's an example of kind of graphs and reports and data that a team might use for decision making. This is just an example screenshot from the check-in, check-out Swiss application where you can track check-in, check-out behavioral data. I know that the Missouri School-Wide PBIS Network, if you go to missouripbis.org or just Google Missouri PBIS, they've got lots of things related to database decision-making on that website and some at tier 2 as well. But this team is going to be looking at data to see for each student that's enrolled in the intervention, how are they doing and what decisions can we make to support them and also support the adults doing the intervention. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Guffey, who's going to talk about another tier 2 intervention with social skills intervention groups.
Thank you, Kelsey. All right, social skill intervention groups, probably one of my favorite interventions of the tier 2 intervention pieces. It is sometimes called either social skills intervention groups or small group social skills. Either way, it is primarily for those students who demonstrate social skill acquisition deficits. This could include students who have trouble making or keeping friends, possibly have difficulty in responding appropriately in particular situations, or sometimes are uncooperative. So when we look at the different steps in building social skills, the first step is that the intervention revolves around assessment and data decision rules. Small group social skills is usually an intervention that teams build after and implement after other interventions, such as, say, for instance, check-in, check-out, like Kelsey just described. Because of this, data decision rules might already be established. However, it's important to identify within that process when and how the team will identify that students being considered are displaying social skill challenges as a primary concern, while also identifying the type of skills that need to be targeted. Or again, I'm going to just repeat that again. While you've got those data decision rules established, it's so important that we make sure that we are identifying what type of intervention needs. We want to make sure we match the intervention with what the student need is. So once we go through and we have those data decision rules, and it's clear which students need those that social skill intervention, it's important to determine really whether or not the need for social skills is due to a skill deficit or a performance deficit. In both of these cases, directly teaching the appropriate social skill is warranted, okay? But practice opportunities really need to vary. In the case of a skill deficit, repeated instruction should occur until the student uses the skill fluently across all school environments, in all settings. A necessary component to building this fluency is the frequent use of prompts or prereqs, all right? And then high rates of positive specific feedback across all of the school environments. With a performance deficit, students should still be taught the appropriate social skill. However, more emphasis should be placed on the environmental supports that allow the student to get their need met when using the appropriate skill, and not allowing the student to get their need met through an inappropriate social skill use. Once the team determines how skill or performance deficit will be determined, the next step then is essentially to start looking at curriculum. So as the team starts to adopt the curriculum, which is our second step, Kelsey, can you go ahead and go to that next slide for me? Thank you, sir, appreciate it. It's important that it can be adapted to the needs of your students, your school, and or your community. When looking at different curriculum to adopt, as well as when to adapt it, it is important to assure that the essential features of effective instruction are embedded, right? The U.S. Department of Education emphasizes the use of evidence-based practices to improve outcome for students. And currently, the What Works Clearinghouse, also known as the WWC, recognizes 4 manualized school-based social skill programs as evidence-based practices. So one of them is Coping Power, The Incredible Years, Positive Action, and then First Steps to Success. Now, I do want to note on this, though, that teams should not rely solely on a manualized social skill curriculum to address all their students' needs, okay? Additional practice examples using school-based targeted social skills and culturally relevant examples should be included as supplements. So essentially, we also have to take into context of our students, the environmental concern pieces of that nature, to make sure that we are adapting that appropriately. Likewise, not all lessons within a packaged program will be relevant or even necessary for all of those students. Our third step then is in building that intervention group would be then the lesson plan development. So it's important to ensure that procedures and routines are outlined and reviewed during each lesson. Additionally, we want to make sure that there is a clear link between the social skills that are being taught and how they directly relate to the school-wide expectations. So as we're talking about respect, we want to make sure that if respect is one of those universal expectations we have within our building, we really want to make sure that as we're teaching those social skills lessons, that we are tying them back to that respect, responsibility, safe, whatever those pieces are. As we plan and we begin to teach, which is our fourth step, which is teaching, it's important that we teach the skills and our behaviors just like we teach academics. We do this by going through that process of tell, show, practice, or also known as I do, we do, you do. And we provide positive, specific feedback when students display that skill appropriately. Again, we want to make sure that we're implementing those essential features of effective instruction in order to make sure that, that we're doing that appropriately. That last step in building the intervention is really essentially generalization. As we utilize prompts and cues, positive specific feedback, and naturally occurring reinforcers while explicitly utilizing the language found on the matrix with students, it is equally important that staff members utilize these strategies as well, right? So as students are practicing these things, we want to make sure that staff are utilizing that same language and are being consistent to help promote that. Staff members should be provided a set of clear generalization strategies to assist students in utilizing the skills they are learning within a variety of different settings. The more that students are able to utilize these skills in different environments, the more likely it is for those skills to become second nature. As social skill intervention groups are implemented, it's important that we kind of really just we look at 4 pieces, right? So 1 is follow the essential features of effective instruction. 2, that we use empirically validated strategies to teach, practice, and promote generalized responding. 3, that we embed social skill instruction, practice, and feedback across multiple educational and social contexts. And 4, that we ensure targeted skills are culturally and linguistically relevant. Now, while there are a number of things that go into social skill intervention groups, there are 3 items that we really got to make sure that are in place in order for the intervention to really be successful. That very first one is that the team must adopt a social skills curriculum that embeds the validated essential features. Notice I keep saying that, right? That embeds those validated essential features, and then adapt that curriculum so that it meets the needs of the school, of the students, and of the community. The second priority piece is that educators must implement social skill instruction with fidelity, right? This means that we must also monitor implementation fidelity data and then respond accordingly and swiftly. And then third, educators and teams must differentiate social skill instruction across a continuum of student needs as a means to promote generalized responding by providing multiple opportunities to practice across all school settings with multiple adults to build fluency and generalized responding. Kelsey, I think self-monitoring.
And so before we move into self-monitoring, let's take just a moment and draw some connections. Both check in, check out and social skills intervention groups are giving students additional time for skill development, additional instruction, additional feedback. We've got 2 different interventions so far that are working at delivering those essential elements of a targeted intervention. They're just doing it in different ways. And with what Trisha talked about regarding generalization, we're able to see that the goal isn't that we stay with the tier 2 intervention forever. The goal is that we get to a place, whether it's check in, check out or social skills intervention groups, that we're fading, we're generalizing, we're graduating from the intervention. Our last of the 3 that we're going to talk about today is self-monitoring. So with self-monitoring, it's the practice of observing and recording our own actions and behavior, or for the student in particular, they're going to pay attention to what are they doing. And in general, it's designed to teach them to change or maintain their own behavior. So when you're paying attention to what you're doing, you're actually kind of in the driver's seat of being able to make the changes that are necessary. So an example might be for even all of us, just using a checklist to ensure that you've completed all the steps of a process. Or maybe you're like me, I have a to-do list every day. I love a good list. I'm going to cross things off that list to make sure that I've done it. So in doing both of those, whether it's a checklist to see, did I do all the steps of the process, or a to-do list for the day, I'm guaranteeing that the things that I need to do have actually been done. And both of those are examples of self-monitoring. We do them as adults and are successful. It's also successful for kids. It kind of falls under the broader category of self-management. So it's not necessarily a tier 2 intervention that's for every student, but for some students, self-managing their own behavior is a really great tier 2 intervention. It includes goal setting, self-instruction, maybe using some self-talk or some personal statements to direct your behavior. The ultimate thing that we need to remember with self-monitoring is that there are 2 things that have to be present in order for this to occur and be successful. The participant, namely the student, has to have the skill in their repertoire. So whatever they're monitoring, they actually have to be able to do. So it's not an intervention we would necessarily start with, but it could be an intervention that we work up to. And it's an intervention that we could choose for the right student. They've got to have the skill in their repertoire. And they've also got to be able to discriminate between the occurrence of the skill. So what that means is I can do it, and I can also pay attention and tell myself when I did it and when I didn't do it. So let's take a closer look with self-monitoring. So the first thing is we're going to start as the adults. We're going to identify the targeted behavior. What is it we want you to pay attention to? What is it that we want you to do? So we're going to identify it because it's likely tied back to whatever the problem behavior was that you had been demonstrating. So we want to think about the replacement behavior, something that is, again, is in your repertoire. And the team of adults is going to determine that targeted replacement behavior for the student to perform instead of what they had been doing. Now, we do want to connect this back to our school-wide expectations. So again, we see that anchor. We're anchoring everything back to what we've been doing at tier 1. So we're not going to pick something brand new. We're going to use our matrix and use that to lead us down that right path of identifying the target behavior. Then we're going to be about the business of defining that target behavior. And you can see on the screen, I've given you that awesome acronym. We call it AMPUA. There's a lot of power in AMPUA because we're going to get to the place where we're super specific. We want to know that when we define that targeted behavior, we're to a place where I can see it happen. I know if it happened or if it didn't happen. I can also measure how many times you did it or how many times you didn't do it. It's positively stated because that's what we're going to be the business of, positively moving the student forward. It's understandable, or sometimes you might say it's in student-friendly language, but it's easily understood by the student what they should be doing. And it's going to be a behavior that's always applicable. And again, we want it to be something that we've seen the student do before. It's got to be something that's in their repertoire. So an example might be respect others. In that category of respect, I could use respectful language, keep hands and feet to self, ask to use other people's belongings. Those are all example targeted behaviors that meet that AMPUA criteria. Or with something like follow directions, I could say, listen to what you're being asked to do, or ask questions if needed, begin the task. Those are examples that a student could self-manage and self-monitor and keep track of whether or not they've did it, whether or not they've done it. Once I've defined that targeted behavior for the student and they're managing it, okay, I want to be able to collect some baseline, or before they're managing it, I want to be able to collect some baseline data. I want to know, what's your current level? How are you doing right now before you start self-monitoring? So it could be frequency counts, could be time sampling. I love to call it kind of secret scoring. You know, it's something that we're going to do secretly just to see, where are you now? Because if we're going to start doing an intervention, my hope is that we see positive change once we've started the intervention. So by having that baseline, I have a point of reference of where you were before we did the intervention. And it's also going to be able to help me monitor your progress better, maybe set a more appropriate goal for you. Moving into designing the procedures and the materials, well, I kind of have to get my ducks in a row. I need to think about, when throughout the day are you going to monitor? Is it going to be all settings or all times, all activities? Is there something that's more problematic and that's the time of day? I have to think through the logistics. And because this is new for the student, oftentimes at the beginning, I'm going to need a way to prompt them or cue them to remember to self-monitor, because we're trying to develop that skill. If that skill was already established, truthfully, we wouldn't be here at talking about tier 2 interventions. It's because that skill isn't established and solidified that we're here. So I'm going to have to think through the logistics of all of this and the materials. Maybe part of that's creating an age-appropriate daily progress report. So again, we kind of see that check-in, check-out built that larger infrastructure that everything gets to be a part of. So here's an example of what a self-monitoring or self-management daily progress report might look like. So you can see in that first column, here are the times. Here are the times a day I'm going to monitor and manage. And then I can see I've got 3 different things that I'm working on. I'm keeping my hands and feet to myself. I'm following directions, and I'm using materials appropriately. Those are the behaviors that I, as the student, am working on managing and monitoring. Here's another example. This might be more applicable for some older grades where they've got different periods throughout the day and they're moving from one room to the next. And you can see that the language on here, safe, respectful, learner, I'm willing to bet this is mapped back to the building-wide expectations in that building-wide matrix. So they're not creating brand new replacement behaviors. We're going back to what we already taught, already expect, and we're just intensifying it here. And here's another example. Now, all of these examples that I've showed you today, you can find these and more from the Missouri PBIS, missouripbis.org website, and in that tier 2 section. There's lots of information that you can use to do really solid work at tier 2. Now, once I've designed the procedure, the materials, and we're ready to start the actual implementation of the intervention, well, now I'm going to teach the student to self-monitor. There needs to be that moment where I set the student up for success. So just like what Trisha talked about with small group social skills, I'm making sure that that student is getting instruction so they can be successful. They need the same level of instruction here to be successful, making sure they understand this is what the targeted behavior is. and making sure they understand how to fill out their daily progress report and self-monitor and when to do that. And then we're going to hopefully use our baseline data, that secret scoring, to set a goal, kind of what's just within reach, because what you saw on those examples of the DPR is there's point values attached. So it's unrealistic for any person, even adults, to say, my goal is 100%. I'm going to do everything perfectly all day long. We as adults don't do that. And so we need to safeguard against that being the expectation for students. Using that baseline data, that secret scoring, we can set a goal that's just within reach. And then as that student demonstrates success, we can increase that goal and monitor that progress. So you noticed in those examples that at those key times when the student's giving feedback to themselves, they're self-monitoring, saying, here's how I did, and did I do these things, yes or no? We also want that to be the opportunity for the teacher to monitor progress. So throughout the day, we should be giving increased opportunities for feedback, which is another one of those essential elements at Tier 2. And we want to be able to check how the student's doing. They should be able to self-monitor and compare it with us, so that way they're getting that additional time for skill development and instruction, because our feedback is educative. So we're going to continue that process of monitoring and giving feedback, following up with the student. Maybe there's things that we just need to kind of tweak, change, modify. Maybe just a quick reminder about what the replacement skill is, what it looks like, sounds like. And that's all part of that following up process, just to make sure the system's working the right way to support the success of the student. Now, we hopefully are going to get to a place where we can fade. We can fade these supports out. We can graduate. And by having the student graph their own progress data, that's a really great way to support that student as they get closer and closer to the fading process. Because when they're consistently using the skill, which is what we want, and they're meeting their goal or going beyond that, well, then we're going to kind of dismantle scaffolds. If you think about any construction site, there's a lot of scaffolding that goes up at the beginning, because we really want to build a strong system of support as this new thing's being built. But as this thing starts to stand on its own, more and more is built with strength and a solid foundation, we don't keep those scaffolds up there. We slowly dismantle them. And it's kind of the same approach that we take here with Tier 2. We slowly dismantle, and maybe we reduce the times throughout the week that the student's going to self-monitor. So we've given you a big overview of 3 Tier 2 evidence-based practices, which oftentimes are the go-tos. When we think about building a menu of options, this is kind of what's there in order to have a grab and go. And what we talked about is each one of these has the essential elements in place. And what we've got is that each one is kind of building on the infrastructure that check-in, check-out created. So we're going to move into our exemplar today, talking about Tier 2 in the high school settings.
Thanks so much, Kelsey and Tricia. So Nat and I are going to spend the next few minutes going over some examples of the work that we've done with high schools implementing check-in, check-out specifically. There we go. So as exemplars, we're going to briefly outline a high school contextual backdrop, and then we'll share some specifics related to some of the features that we've seen schools really kind of puzzle through, but then find some great solutions to. So I'm going to go through this quite quickly. Some of you may have seen this before if you've been in sessions with me. The idea here is that in the context of high schools, there are certain influences that make PBIS implementation at all 3 tiers different. There's the size, the culture, and the developmental level. Size refers to not only the size of the building, the size of the staff, the student body, etc., but also a lot of the more complex things that come out of that. The schedules, things operating within departmental structures, etc. Culture really here refers to the organizational culture. And the primary thing that I want to point out with regard to this is that teachers often, and on most of our staff, have this idea that students should really know how to behave by now. And that impacts a lot of the work that we're trying to do as PBIS implementers to try to convince the staff that this is time well spent and that it will have an important impact on our academic outcomes as well. And finally, this is somewhat obvious, but the developmental level of our students, they really want to be more independent and in charge of decision making. So it's important to take that into account and just involve them more in the conversation. And related to those contextual influences, there are 3 foundational systems that we've noticed that are really critical in high schools. There's the data systems, which not only involves data collection, but also utilizing that data for decision making, sharing it out with your staff, etc. Leadership system, which includes not only your leadership team in the building, your single administrative team, but also any leadership teams that are involved in this type of work. We often have attendance groups or climate groups or other groups among our staff who are working towards similar efforts, but in silos. And then because we're so big, this is very related to size, communication is very important. We have so many more people we're trying to move toward a common goal that becomes critical. Now, moving forward, the core features of implementation, despite the fact that our context is different in high school, our core features of implementation are the same. We can't just drop a piece of PBIS or drop a certain element of a tier 2 intervention. What we need to do is implement the standard features, but we're really pushing them through that high school lens. And so they are going to look a little bit different. And then finally, if we take all those things into consideration, we're better equipped to implement PBIS at all tiers in our settings and to achieve the outcomes that we're going for in high school. I'm going to move ahead, and I think we'll skip our poll question. Kelsey and Trisha did such a beautiful job of orienting you to the cycles of PBIS. Of check-in, check-out specifically. I don't think we'll spend much time on that right now. Important to note, however, is that at all 3 of these cycles, your context is going to have an impact. And so it's important to think about that. Right out of the gates in the morning, the student cycle is going to be impacted. That green circle with the morning check-in, you have students coming in from the bus or the parking lot in different buildings in many cases. And so it's important to think about what will check-in look like in your high school context and how will that be different. The daily cycle is also going to be impacted. Students have a different teacher each period, and there needs to be a greater emphasis, therefore, on training and support to try to help those teachers be as consistent as possible. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. And then finally, the team cycle is relatively stable across middle and high schools, but there are specific elements of the team's work that we have seen that the schools need to adapt. And so we're going to cover those a little bit later in detail also. So having considered the high school context and some of those cycles as a backdrop, we're going to dive into some specifics. And these are hopefully things that resonate with you, things that you're experiencing or that you have been faced with as you're trying to implement check-in, check-out at the high school level. Perhaps the most visible, but also easily overlooked adaptation is in high schools can be the daily progress report, whether that's paper or electronic. The student's developmental age is often referred to as a barrier to using a DPR, that nobody thinks the kids will be willing to do it. But what we've seen is that there are some adaptations that can be made to make the DPR more developmentally appropriate. One of the things that you'll see here, and if you think back to the example that Kelsey shared, what we note here in our high school, this is an example for one of the high schools we work with, is that the student and the teacher are both providing ratings. Oftentimes at the younger grades, you may bring in a student self-rating later as part of fading in check-in, check-out. But with our high schools, we tend to do that right at the beginning. It brings the student in as a partner and really gets them more engaged in the process right from the beginning. The DPR also needs to reflect our very complicated high school schedules. And this is a great example of a school who is on an AB block And so they found a way to note the student just circles whether they're in period 1 or period 2, et cetera, as they move through their day. And then finally, because academics and behavior are so closely linked, we often see academic related skills added to the DPR, such as homework being up to date or things like that. And I just caution you to be careful because these types of things can be punishing to the student and can take away the conversation from their social behavior in class and just be adding extra stress around the academics, which many of our kids, as you know, already struggle with. Okay, so now I want to shift to teacher training. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. And in standard implementation, there's typically a school-wide check-in, check-out training that's conducted possibly at a staff meeting, and then there's an overview. And then as students are enrolled, there might be a little bit of brush up or booster for each teacher. So what we want to say is that at the secondary level, remember that we've added a few variables into the mix. The number of teachers is larger. Students can be seeing a number of teachers at each day, and those teachers are usually centrally focused on their specific content area. They're not so focused always on the development of these kids. So the schools that we've worked with have decided to place a greater emphasis on teacher training and supporting their implementation fidelity. As an elementary student, if you've trained my teacher well and she can do check in, check out with high fidelity, I'm more likely to benefit from that intervention. As a high school student though, all 8 of my teachers need to be trained well so that more of them are likely to implement with fidelity, and then, and only then, am I more likely to benefit from the intervention. So that consistency is critical in high schools across the day as the students getting those ratings. And so it's important for the teams to provide that extra training. Quick note that early on, we also saw a lot of teachers mixing up academic feedback with behavioral feedback. And so we saw, teachers saying, I'm going to give you all 0s today because your homework is missing. So that's clearly counterproductive. And we need to work with them on an ongoing basis to make sure that they have the support to understand the concepts of positive and constructive feedback and really building behavioral momentum. Okay, Nad?
Thanks, Mimi. Had to unmute myself there. In the interest of time, I will mostly be focusing on the right side of the slides and really just talking about the high school considerations. And just a quick note, the arrow in the middle there says yes and. It isn't that none of the standard implementation features are not in place, but we also want to consider these high school things related to the high school context. So just a quick note about that. So screening and referral, no matter what level of education we're talking about, whether it's elementary, middle, high, it's important to have a good tier 1 system that's capturing as many students as possible. So in terms of MTSS or PBIS implementation, we found that the high schools we were working with were often a little bit behind or a little bit late to the party in terms of their implementation. We were working with some schools that didn't have as strong a tier 1 systems in place. So implementation and sustainability of check in, check out was a bit challenging. They really needed to quickly develop systems that allowed for efficient screening and referral to make sure that the educators in the building were aware of those procedures. So they really relied on good systems, and in a sense, they didn't always have those ready to go, and really, it took us some time to get there. The schools we work with decided to start implementing check in, check out primarily with freshmen. They quickly realized that this was really all they could do with the resources that they had available at that time. And some of those first referrals to check in, check out or to a tier 2 intervention really came from the teachers and the school counselors at the middle or junior high schools where these freshmen were coming from. So high schools reviewed that information of how kiddos were doing previously And then looked at, well, how are they doing in high school? You know, it's October, November. How are they doing now? And then were there any indications that they were at risk for dropping out, attendance, behavior, course performance? So once the referral and screening processes were in place, students identified in high school often had academic and poor organizational skills, which isn't talked about quite as much at the lower grades. These students that were being identified for tier 2 or check-in, check-out really had more internalizing behaviors. They weren't those overt behavioral issues that we often see, but they were often, you know, the kiddos that were sitting in the back of the classroom, hoods up. The kiddos you might even forget are there sometimes. It's like, oh, right, I forgot that John was here today, and what do I need to do for him? So their behaviors weren't overt, but their grades or academic skill deficits were noticed. Because kids in high school talk with their feet and have more ability to walk away, we really needed to be sure that the students that were selected for check-in, check-out actually were there about 70 to 80% of the time. We needed a pretty good attendance record, because if you're not there to receive the intervention, you're not going to benefit from the intervention. So that was one of our screening criteria. The check-in, check-out process in high school is also really collaborative. So while students may have been referred, we always gave students the option of starting, but also stopping when they didn't want to continue. And some chose not to participate at all. And we really respected that. This process led schools really to becoming more aware of the fact that they would need to expand their tier 2 options so that students that weren't a fit for check-in, check-out would get the support they needed. And I'm going to go really quickly here. Guardian communication, the primary, Mimi, can you go to the next slide for me?
Yep, I'm working on it. Sorry.
That's okay.
There you go.
So guardian communication really had to do with, it's just because of the developmental level, we did it less frequently with parents. We asked students more about what's the best way to get in touch with your parent or guardian. It was really just not something that was done quite as frequently. It could be done with an email, something like that. So it was just really based on the developmental level of those students. The instructional focus, the big thing here I want you to think about is we needed to start pretty quickly with helping students learn those self-regulation skills. There was already an expectation that now that these students are in high school, that they're already going to have a lot of these skills. And we have so many students, so many more students in high school, we couldn't allow students to be on check-in, check-out forever. We needed to be sure that we were teaching them those skills, coaching them on those skills regularly so that we could move students off, fade them on the intervention, and get other students who needed assistance on the intervention. It's also a big responsibility, as Mimi mentioned. These students are now with anywhere from 4 to 8 different teachers across their day sometimes, or every other day. And so there's a lot of code switching. So as we're coaching students on this and trying to help them generalize their skills, we're also telling them, but be mindful of different teachers have a little bit different expectations for things. And so they really had to take that on a bit too. That was a new skill that we were trying to teach them. And last is the implementer support systems. So in high school, the number of students in high school who benefit from check-in, check-out made it so that we really needed to have more than one person. And I'm talking about this check-in, check-out facilitator now, who was checking students in and out. These are the individuals who connect with them before, after school, and actually during school across multiple locations. So it was really important that that we usually had more than one person, and that this was someone that students could relate to. In one of our campuses, it was 2 of the campus monitors. These campus monitors were able to take on several students each. They already knew most of the students. This was really just an extension of their job. And it's the part of the job they really liked the most. They liked interacting with students, and they wanted to be a part of helping students be more successful. The check-in, check-out coordinator, the one listed in the blue box, that's really the person that manages things like data review, analysis, initial student instruction, but they're also the ones that are communicating with teachers, providing some of that ongoing training that Mimi talked about, ongoing coaching. So not only are they coaching students and supporting check-in, check-out facilitators, but they're also that liaison with teachers and oftentimes with the families, okay? So we only have 5 minutes left, so I think we want to go to Q&A. Keep in mind that while there are differences in the high school context, those tier 2 critical features are still at play. You can go to the next slide, Mimi. Be thinking about the questions that you have, but just remember that we still want to keep those tier 2 critical features in place that Trisha and Kelsey talked about, but we're considering those with these high school contextual influences of size, culture, and developmental level. We've got some resources listed in the slides for you, books, some websites. There is more information coming out now, and some of the resources on our additional resources page talk about how do you do check-in, check-out. What are some ideas for doing check-in, check-out virtually? Check-in, check-out books and videos. You may have seen these before, but they're 2 of the most common ones used. And here's how you can reach us as well. And we're going to turn this back over to Kelsey.
And you've got in the slides that are uploaded to Pathable all the things that Mimi and Nad talked about, as well as resources that Trisha and I have highlighted today, whether it's CW Fit items or things related to any of the other interventions. But what we're going to do now is our presenters today are going to turn their cameras on so that way you can see us, and we'll use the time that we have remaining to just kind of engage in a really focused Q&A with you. So I'm going to ask Danielle Starkey, who's been one of our content facilitators today, as well as Tim Lewis. What are the things that have kind of come through while we've been presenting today that we can talk about before we close up this session?
Sure, I'll jump in first. Danielle and I have answered pretty much every question to the best that we can in the poll because there were several of them and we knew that we're running short of time. You know, one of the common themes I think that has come out, and it'd be great to hear from all of you, is what does this look like virtually and remotely? We've given them the link to the document on pbs.org, but you know, that's still kind of general. Any tips or suggestions for any of the tier 2 strategies and remote learning, I think would be really helpful to the group.
Go ahead, Trisha.
I think one thing I would say, whether it be with check-in, check-out, small groups, self-monitoring, I think one thing that's important when we talk about this is there's that need for that human connection when it comes to all students with a staff member. That's not just at a tier 2 or tier 3 level, but that's at a tier 1 level. And I think that when going through those processes, really establishing those relationships. So if you're really implementing that intervention in a virtual setting, I think the very first thing within that process is you establish that relationship. If you can go through and have a student, I kind of mentioned this in the chat, and have a student, whether it be with, let's say, check-in, check-out, identify specifically who's an adult in the building they have a good relationship with, whether that be the attendance secretary, whether that be their a custodian or a cafeteria staff member or a classroom teacher. If they can find a connection with that relationship, and we can set up some sort of system within that process in that virtual setting, the chances of that student going through and participating in that intervention is much higher because there's a relationship there. I would also say that Howard Wills out of KU has developed a really good self-monitoring app called iConnect that is utilized on an app that a lot of, with students having technology now, is really accessible. And it's got some really great research behind it as far as students within special education as well. So that would also be something that I would look at. But I think when you're talking about how do we get students to even participate in intervention, I think it's really starting with the relationship and tying again everything back to those universal expectations, whether it be respect, responsibility, or safe. That's just kind of my quick thoughts and opinions. I don't know who else on the team would like to kind of comment on that too.
The only thing that I would add to that is that if you're going to be giving feedback in a virtual setting, you've got to have that step first of identifying what is it that I expect during remote or distance or online learning. You know, if I show up to the Zoom room, you know, what does it look like, sound like to be safe, respectful, responsible in that space? Because those would then be the things that I need to give feedback on. Danielle, Tim, other questions that have come through?
Those were the main ones, and people are already problem solving in chat to that question. So it's been a great group. We're right at 2 o'clock, so I think we need to wrap up. This will be immediately available and it will be archived, so you can access this at any point. Thank you all to our speakers.
Thank you everybody for joining us today. And the next session will pick up at, I believe, 2:30. And so, or at 2:30 Central, but half past the hour wherever you are. And we hope that you have a great continuation of the forum.
Big thanks to our content facilitators and to also our technology coordinator. So could not have done this without all of you guys. So thank you very much.
Remember
and thank you for attending.
Remember to complete the evaluation. Thank you.
Thanks so much.